Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. Uh, okay, so far we have dealt with interoperability standards, so and which was like OCCI, CME, and CAMP, right? And interoperability is all about interoperating between two different types of parties. So in this case, we have two different types of software components that are talking to each other, and the major standard that all the other standards uses, they rely on REST services and data formats like XML, JSON, and YAML. There are so many different. So these are the main formats, XML and JSON, that mostly it is used, and YAML is also used in some cases. So today we'll look into the portability standards. So portability is basically you should be able to move something and make it adaptable into some different environment. That is the meaning of portability. So we have two standards that we're looking at. One is OVF, which is dealing with portability of virtual machines. Okay, and the second thing is Tosca, which is dealing with the portability of services. So OVF is for porting virtual machines, and Tosca is for porting services, which means having a way to move them and make it adaptable in a different uh, environment. So it may mean that that I want to upload a virtual machine which I have created. It may mean that I want to move a virtual machine from one cloud to another cloud. So the movement of virtual machine, so anytime when we look at these standards, everything has to be defined in a very generic way. Okay, so if you're um, if you're talking about means it cannot be very something which is very tied to the proprietor. For example, I'm making an electric point which cannot fit in every house, then it is not portable. So it has to be portable where it can move and adapt into any houses. So and that can happen only through if everyone follows a particular standard. So, since cloud deals mainly with virtual machines and services, these are the one of the two major key technologies that cloud uses, right? Virtualization and service-oriented computing, and that is where service-oriented computing in turn relies on REST services and JSON and XML and SOAP standards, and a lot of other standards were created out of it. Also, we came across when we studied SOAP. We mentioned that SOAP itself has 74 initiatives in which we're looking at 74 standards to cover different aspects of the communication. So with that, let's dive into the first portability standard, which is OVF. Now, I've not seen your question papers um, for your final year, so I do not know what type of questions they ask. But ideally, uh, looking at this, there may be some questions on describing some standards and cloud computing definition, then characteristics of cloud, deployment scenarios, use cases. All these can be questions from unit 1. So this presentations was created very lately, so it is not existing as of now on the drive, and I'll upload it later. So for today we will be looking at this particular presentation. So OVF, what does it stand for? It stands for Open Virtualization Format. OVF is a cloud computing standard for porting virtual machines. In other words, the ability of virtual machine to adapt into another environment. Porting VM, as I said, from one physical machine to another physical machine. Porting the VM from one cloud provider to another cloud provider. Maybe porting, when you say porting VM from one physical machine to another physical machine, it does not mean necessarily that it is from your machine to some other machine, or it is like from my machine to some outside world. Within the cloud itself, machines are constantly being moved for some reason, so because we are dealing with a lot of machines, and sometimes the physical machine may get exhausted with too many requests, or maybe it is better to move some physical virtual machine to another virtual machine. So that kind of example I said, it is called live migration. It does not, the user does not know that behind the scene his virtual machine has moved from one physical machine to another physical machine. His software is still running. So this is done with the help of there's a lot of communication with the hypervisors, and definitely, so when we're dealing with hypervisors, we come across examples. Last year we came across three hypervisors, right? We came across Xen, we came across VMware, and we came across Microsoft's Hyper-V. These are all hypervisors. So Xen is the most preferred hypervisor because it is available for free. So when we are porting something, how do we shift something in the internet world? It is all data ultimately, right? It is all bits. So basically everything has to be packed in a particular, all the data has to be packed in a particular format and in a particular structure. And just as in the beginning I mentioned that if I want to define a standard for car, I will define a structure, that there is a car, there is a total number of wheels in that, and that kind of standard I will create. And if everybody follows that standard, then everybody will be able to know how many wheels my cars have. In the same way, when virtual machines have to be ported across, not only so one is the virtual machine image file, right? The image file is the file which is created when you create a virtual machine. We have done this practical last semester, where we created a virtual machine and everything is packed in one file. But that file, if you want to port it across, you need to convert it into .ovf format. So that OVF format will basically give details as when you're dealing with machines, and definitely you're dealing with the operating systems, basically the platform that it supports, and the hardware that it supports. Like in hardware, we said when we talk about machines, we are talking about three key things: processor, memory, and storage. So based on this information, the destination, your destination component which wants to create this virtual machine. So let's say you created a virtual machine locally. Okay, now you want to port it to Azure, you want to port it to AWS. So what is the first thing you will go for? First thing is you create this format based on whatever format this softwares are created in, .vdi format is an image file, but that image file has to be packed inside the OVF. So basically image file is one aspect about, that is your actual data, your main it's like when you're moving a house, you pack everything in 10 boxes, but you have to make a list separate list which is like a .ovf file, which says there are 10 boxes, and in this box there is utensils, in this box there is glass, so be careful. In this another box, there is a table, furniture pieces, so, and there's a fan, and basically everything has to be listed and structured. That is a your way of passing on the data when you're moving the house with your things. So image file is like your things, that you want to transfer, but .ovf file would be like your list, which contains all the information that a virtual machine that will be required to create a machine. So .ovf file contains metadata. It is basically, metadata means data about data. Okay, so it means data about virtual machine. So when you're moving the house, data about things of the house that you're moving, so metadata. So always remember that metadata is equal to data about data. So it consists of metadata about the virtual machine, the image itself, and the group of images that can be deployed as a unit. Now when we say group of images, means you must have created you must have created an application which consists of 3 different components in your system. You must have had a web server, you would have had a middleware application which is like your business components and business REST services, and you must have had a database. Now all these 3 pieces of software, you have 2 options, right? One is all these 3 pieces of software is packed in one virtual machine image itself, is running inside one virtual machine. But you also have an option of running these 3 individual pieces in 3 different virtual machines and connecting them through a network. So that is also possible. And so in that case, when you cannot be transferring only the web server, right? In addition to web server, you have also created a database, you have also created the middleware components. Everything is a unit, so it is, and so you have to transfer a group of images, which is one unit, and that unit has to, the other side, whoever the destination component is, or destination cloud is, that cloud should be able to take your OVF file which contains one image or a unit of more images, and should be able to recreate the entire scenario. And then also definitely along with that OVF file, you're also going to be sending the image file. So it provides a mechanism, so OVF standards provides a mechanism to package and deploy services as either a virtual appliance or used within an enterprise, or to pre-package known configurations of a virtual machine image or images. Okay, so this is one advantage, right, of using a virtual machine. We are dealing with machine, we cannot move physical machines, but definitely we can move a virtual machine, because virtual machine is ultimately a software. So a question at this stage: what is the virtual machine image file called in AWS? So that's the question. What is the virtual machine image file called in AWS cloud? Any answer? Can everyone hear me? Because okay, I'm not receiving any answer. So the answer is, it's called Amazon Machine Image. In short, it is called AMI. So that is the answer. So whenever you have to create a machine, you can also say which machine image you want. So that machine image, so we created last year a machine image of your Java platform. We created a machine image of your your Ubuntu. So these are all machine images which we can transfer. So Amazon AWS also provides their own machine images, which is based on Linux operating system and Windows operating system. An OVF file may contain information regarding how many CPUs are there, what is the memory required, what is the network configuration. So as I said, if there are three image files that you're transferring as a unit, and they're all connected in a network, definitely all the three units, they have to know the IP addresses for each other, right? Otherwise they will not be able to connect to each other. Then we need to make sure each IP address is configured with the router to accept with proper permissions. So permissions have to be given. And sometimes not only the image is required and not only the network configuration is required, but mostly the security policies also have to be applied. In the sense, you may want to sign it using some certificates, so that security certificates. Otherwise that would be a recommended practice whenever you are dealing with virtual machines. So when you are sending your packed virtual images, you also have to pack along with that this configuration information of networks, plus you have to also pack your security policy certificates, and all this becomes like a one big packet which you can unzip it on the other side and install it. The OVF standard is not tied to any particular hypervisor or instruction set architecture. So instruction set architecture would mean it is not tied to particular machine. Every machine has got its own instruction. Like 32-bit computers, physical machine will have its own instruction set. A Mac operating system will have its own instruction set. So and hypervisor would mean hypervisor would mean Oracle VirtualBox, or it would mean Zen, it would mean VMware, it would mean Microsoft Hyper-V. It doesn't, OVF is generic, right? So we have created a generic standard. Now it is up to all these hypervisor software providers that they have to follow this standard. It is up to the cloud provider that it follows OVF standards. So OVF uses SOAP to transfer or port virtual machine. So internally, so across two different, when you're porting something from one machine to another, from one place to another place, so how it is transferred? It is, you can use SOAP format, SOAP data formats. So this is something, if you have understood SOAP protocol, so basically it has a structure like JSON, right? It has a parent element, it has a root element. So these are some of the elements that has to be there as part of your OVF SOAP structure. You need to have a virtual system defined, and then there may be a set of virtual machine, then it will become virtual system collection, and then you have to define a virtual hardware section, and so different sections are there, and there may be different attributes associated with each section. So in hardware you can maybe have network interface, something like that. So this is like a SOAP structure. If you see it says virtual hardware section, memory is equal to 4 GB, CPU is equal to 1 GHz, disk is equal to 100 GB. So this is the data that has been sent in the OVF file, and based on this data, the other cloud provider or the other client will be able to understand what this machine consists of and how to recreate it on the other side. Now of course, if you don't have a CPU of 1 GHz on the other side, let's say I want to port my virtual machine into your virtual machine. Now mine, for example, let's say it is 64-bit, and it has to be 64-bit. It will never work in 32-bit, and you have a 32-bit virtual machine. So sending across this kind of data to you, you on the other side will read my data and you will decide whether you can really create this kind of machine. If you cannot, then definitely you will throw an error message saying this machine cannot be ported. I support only 32 bits. So there can be issues when portable does not mean you can port into any kind of devices, right? If you're using a very old technology, or if cloud is using any old technology, we cannot fit in there. If I build something in the new technology, then the new technology has to be available on the other side also. If I'm using a pen drive, then definitely USB ports have to be available. So you cannot work on computers without USB ports. Portable does not mean it is portable all the time. So OVF uses this another standard called SIM. It's called CIM, Common Information Model. So basically, as I told you, one aspect is the data aspect, that you need to move the data. But on the other side, once you get the data, you need to implement that also, right? Then how do you implement? One way, definitely we see that we implement REST services, and REST services internally may be using object-oriented programming. So, we came across class diagrams last time. We went through this primer of what does a class diagram look like, and what are the classes and objects that is part of any model. So CIM in the same way, it defines that kind of class models for any IT components. So let us so when we look at any virtual environment, what do we have? First, we have a host computer system. Your host computer system is nothing but your physical computer, right? It's like your laptop. So on the laptop, then you install the virtualization layer. What is that virtualization layer? Your virtualization layer is like your hypervisor. You installed Oracle VirtualBox on your computer. So your Oracle VirtualBox became your virtualization layer. Then on the top, inside that Oracle VirtualBox, you installed a full machine, right? And that machine had its own storage, had its own memory, and then you installed OS on that top of, you installed Ubuntu on the top of it, and on Ubuntu you installed some Java app, right? So this was all packed, and this is an example of full virtualization, right, where OS is also installed as part of the virtual machine. We explained that if it is a container based technology, the OS part will be very small. There will be very thin layer of OS, and containers are more lighter than virtual machines. So but in any virtualization environment, this is the structure. You have a host computer, you have a virtualization layer, and you have the actual virtual machine. In this case, there are two or more virtual machines given. Now if this kind of system has to be moved or ported, that is what we are looking at. So this is a SIM class diagram. So as last time, so as I told you just lately, that OVF, I can send you all the data, but in case if you want to implement everything, you have to follow some class structures, right? Some model. Whenever you're creating a project, you also have to define what type of class structure you're using. That is what CIM comes useful. So this is actually a class diagram. So what you are looking on one side, on the right hand side, you're looking at the how classes are organized. In terms of host computer, means the physical computer. So a physical computer, so we know that if there's a direct line between one class to another class, it means there is a relationship, and that relationship could be a relationship of one-to-one relationship or one-to-many relationship. So here they're trying to say there is a physical machine host computer system which is connected to a class called logical device, but there are three instances of it, which means the relationship between host computer system and logical device is one to many. I can have one physical system and I can have many logical devices. So your logical device could mean like a pen drive, right? Like a pen drive, like a hard disk. This kind of devices can get attached onto your computer. So when you are defining a sim class diagram, sim when you're creating a sim class, when you're using sim, then sim allows you to express what is the physical computer, and that it says it has a relationship with two virtual computer system on the left hand side, which means this class is related to the two virtual computer system, which means there's a relationship of one to many relationship. Then this virtual computer system itself has a relationship with multiple logical device. Means in my own virtual computer machine, I might be having a USB, I may be having a network interface, and so all whatever I have on the physical machine side, I can also have in the virtual machine side. So ultimately your OVF file, that data has to be translated and converted into this class objects. And how is this class objects related? It is expressed in this diagram. So this is a simple diagram when an OVF file is been sent in SOAP format, and then that OVF file is taken and converted into CIM structure, class objects, and those class objects internally will have methods to create the virtual machine, the actual virtual machine which runs over the physical machine. Now who is responsible to create virtual machine? We know hypervisor. So hypervisor is like the manager of all virtual machine. So if anything you have to deal with virtual machines, whether start, stop, delete, move, anything, you cannot pass without passing through the hypervisor. So Oracle VirtualBox is also a hypervisor. So always remember the relationship between hypervisor and virtual machines. Virtual machine cannot be managed without hypervisors. If you are having multiple machines, then you are dealing with multiple hypervisors. Okay, so there's a constant interaction. Let's say if you want to move one virtual machine which is part of hypervisor 1, and then you want to move that virtual machine to another physical machine where there is another hypervisor. So let's say there is a Zen hypervisor on one side, on other side there is a VMware hypervisor managing machines. These two somebody has to coordinate or communicate, or there has to be a way of communication done across hypervisors, so that each hypervisor can take on the responsibility of moving the machine. Without the help of hypervisors, your virtual machines cannot be moved, and without these standards it is only going to get difficult. So these standards are very important if we have to play around with virtual machines. So how does your OVF and your CIM look in the bigger picture? Now this is a diagram which I have created with my a certain perspective. It does not mean there cannot be any variations. You will never find this diagram anywhere. But at a very high level, if you have to think about it logically, how all these standards are working together. So we are looking at on the right hand side, there is a request coming in for infrastructure service and platform service. So infrastructure service would mean anything to deal with your infrastructure, like creating a machine or something. Your platform services would mean basically installing a web server. That could mean a platform service. Now where this request can come from? It can come from the cloud provider's website. It can come from the command line. You can write your own program which is including all the SDK libraries. So if you are having Python application, you can include SDK with Python version and interact with AWS, and then you can have other services inside the cloud also, right? Like S3 is a service which can communicate with Lambda service, and both these services can communicate with SNS, and services can constantly talk with each other inside the cloud also. And or the the option would be that there's a totally different cloud provider which wants to talk to you and transfer the machines. So whenever we deal with virtual machine, what is the first thing we want? We want two things, right? First, we want that OVF file which has the metadata about the virtual machine, the descriptive, it is a metadata. Second, I want the image file that you have created. So that image file is also based on these two pieces of information which you will send to me over SOAP protocol on the HTTP protocol. I can try to recreate that. So who is the first component that is going to interact with us when we want to send a virtual machine into AWS? It is the boundary protocol, and boundary protocol is OCCI, which deals with infrastructure. But we also studied that OCCI not only supports infrastructure, but now it also supports platforms. And what is um, the most appropriate standard that deals with infrastructure is CME. So it is quite possible that OCCI takes this information, and and you must have said, I want to create a machine image, 3 copies of machine image. One is for development environment, one is for production environment, and then one is for my testers. So there are 3 different types of users. Your production environment is basically your live environment which your customers are using. Development environment is only your developers are using, where they can push in their code and test their code, and if it is not working, it's fine. And definitely the testing environment is when you are done with the coding and you want to test it before you move that copy to production. So you might be sending a request of the single image file, but with 3 different environments for 3 different set of users. And that if it is an infrastructure request, then you might pass it on to CME. So CME has a capacity, is specializing in machine volumes and networks, right? That's what we realize. The CME is a master of, it's a standard for machines, volumes, and networks. So once CME knows that it has to start a machine, and this is the OVA file, what it can do, it can take this request and send it to it can do some initialization on itself. It can initialize its own class diagram, class objects. We already saw the class model for CME, and it can then forward that request to the SIM, which is probably managed by hypervisor. So once SIM, once an OVF file and your image file has been given to SIM creates all these class objects. So, and this class objects is nothing but your virtual system. We saw that, right? The host computer system, the virtual system, all these classes are created, and that class, so this is nothing but your set of class objects, and that class object will have a function to implement, to actually go ahead and talk to the hypervisor, and hypervisor will talk to the operating system, and will say we want to block this much of 2 GB of space on this physical machine, and we want to install Ubuntu, and we want to install Java, and we want to do all these things. And then the one OS will give you the permission, or the cloud gives you the permission in a automatic way. Then the SIM program, the function within the SIM, will take care of actually creating the virtual machine. So remember, on the right hand side, it is all, we are all using some standards, and it flows, we are using some standards, but in the end you have to see what kind of hypervisor you are using. You're using Zen hypervisor, then you will have to and that is the first time you will be switching on to the proprietary software, and that will be your Zen SDK. So Zen will expose some functions through which you can programmatically create a virtual machine. The function name will be different on different hypervisors. So but it is only happening at the end, all along the way you're transporting your virtual machine, you're using a particular standard. And reverse way, if you want to ship this virtual machine, now let's say this virtual machine you ported and only it has Ubuntu, but after that you created a website on that, you created, you have installed some softwares on that, and then you want to port it, then again what you need to do, you need to first of all have a way to convert this into .ovf file format, and that OVF file then you can pass it on along the way, and that OVF file along with the image file you can pass it along. Now how does it go the reverse way? I am not very sure which components are used. It depends on the implementation, right? Now you may choose that OCCI is not there, you will directly communicate with CME. you want a direct call to SIMI, or you may say no, everything has to pass through OCCI layer. So there is standards. Now how you implement the standards is your choice, but somebody has given you a kind of a framework. You don't have to design everything. It is already defined for you. You have to just find a way to implement it. So this is a perspective which I could in order for me to explain it to you all in terms of the standards that we are covering. This was the best way to look at things. So I hope it makes it easier for you to understand how all these standards are working with each other. So a standard does not mean it is implementing everything, right? So all these different standards we are using for different implementation for different purposes, and they all work with each other. So whenever you're dealing with any products, whether you're dealing with let's say your let's say security product or software product, you always have to look at standards. What standards are followed in the market? What architectures are followed? What is the use case study? Can we if standards are defined, then that is the way to go. That would be the better way to start with. So what are the different scenarios that is possible in a OVF? So a scenario would be, I want to deploy multiple copies of virtual system to create different environments such as development, testing and production. That is what we already mentioned. Then you may have specific softwares that maybe have to be installed, in which software specific requirements have to be known and for you to know which type of virtual system is to be created. So let us assume that you have a virtual machine, and then you want to install some specific softwares, or you want to basically patch your operating system, or so all this. It is not that you will always be porting a new virtual machine and after that you cannot update it, right? Just like there is a create, read, update, delete option, CRUD operation, you should be able to do that with a virtual machine also. You should be able to do CRUD operations with a virtual machine. So if I've already created a virtual machine and that virtual machine is already updated with some software on the destination box, tomorrow if I want to apply some patch or install some software, I should have a way to do it. And again, I would be using the OVF file. My OVF file will be telling this is the software that has to be installed on this kind of virtual machine with this kind of system. When you give this kind of information, on the other side the destination component will look at it, and they will say, oh, this is you are looking to apply this patch on Ubuntu operating system, and then it will search for all virtual machines in its repository, and that is running, and that is there in its repository. It will search for all those virtual machines and update that image file in a way where when you're updating the image file, so one has to make sure that your current virtual machine is not, which consists of updated other softwares, are not deleted, right? This is like your folder, right? In your folder you have two files, A, B, and then you add C, and then later somebody wants to add D. That does not mean ABC is going to be deleted, right? ABC also has to be maintained and D also has to be added. So but there has to be a way for somebody to tell me which folder you're looking at, right? You're looking at this kind of virtual machine folder with a Ubuntu folder in it. So then I will know, okay, I have to I need to update Ubuntu operating systems. So another use case would be a system containing a web server, REST service and database may have to be installed in a single system where credentials and security information have to be ported. So this is an example where three components are there in your virtual machine, and all these three components have to be installed in a same virtual machine, but definitely everybody cannot access, along with that virtual machine you have to also give credentials, like which are the set of users who can access your system. Maybe what is the admin username, password, or maybe the list of users who are allowed to access, or maybe the which ports are open to access this. So security information also have to be ported. So what would security information contain? Security information would contain your certificates, right? So So we are going to cover a little bit on this in your next section in the cloud security, but this is something you should be knowing by now about your security and certificates. And this last scenario is system that contains all these three components, but they are installed in three different systems, and yet they need to be networked using network configuration, which needs to be ported. So which means the web server is going to be installed in one virtual machine, REST service in another virtual machine, and database in the third virtual machine, and all of them are connected to each other over a network. So the network configuration also has to be passed on inside the OVF file when you are trying to port a distributed application. So that is all about OVF. So 3:20. So it seems like we might finish a little earlier. It seems like. So can we take a small break now? Maybe break of 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes. 3:35. Can we restart at 3:35? Okay, so thank you Ali, and now we move 3:35. Okay, so now we'll continue with another standard, another portability standard, which is called Tosca. So just as OVF deals with virtual machines, Tosca deals with services. So when we say services, what do we mean? So services would mean more at the services actually would mean anything, right? Your services would mean your database service. You're providing a RDS service, which is your relational database service. You're providing a NoSQL platform service. So services, we are talking about all three layers of services, right? We're dealing with infrastructure services, we are dealing with platform services, and we are dealing with your software services. So everything can be viewed as a service. That is what I'm trying to point at. So what does Tosca stands for? Tosca stands for Topology and Orchestration Specification for Cloud Applications. So when we say cloud applications, then we are talking about all those services that we see in a cloud, right? We look at S3 service, Lambda service, and SNS notification service, SQS service, Q service, SCS service, email service. So we are seeing all kinds of services on AWS. Now how will cloud manage so many different types of services? So it looks at a very generic level. It first of all labels everything as a service. That is the first thing that it does to disassociate itself from very specific implementation. A database may be implemented in a particular way, but for me it would just be a service. It would have a name, it would have a way to start, it would have a way to stop, it would have a way to move, it would have a way to scale. So for me, when I talk about service, it is very generic. I should be able to communicate with the service in a way where I should be able to start a service, stop a service, delete a service. So any CRUD operation that you would do with database, something similar I should be able to do with any services. So Tosca defines a meta model topology. So when we have already spoke about metadata, right? Metadata, meta model. These are all like some kind of a class diagrams, which gives you a way to implement stuffs. And orchestration process would mean that you are working with a set of services, right? So it is not necessary that a particular service always is one piece of the component, right? There may be many components and you need to orchestrate it. We have already seen this kind of architecture in service oriented computing. We talk about service orchestration and choreography, where multiple services are there, and either one service becomes a master and then coordinates with the other services, or they are working like a peer-to-peer architecture, where nobody is a master. Everybody has whatever services want to talk to whatever service, some other service, they can go ahead and do it. So how does Tosca define a service with it defines a service with the help of service template. So this is the first thing that it starts out with. It says, okay, every service should have a service template, and every service template will have two components. One is the topology part and one is the orchestration part. So what does the topology component consist of? It will contain all these service components. So I may have a web server, and I may have that web server on which website is hosted, which is connected to a database server. In this case, there are two components involved in my service. So so this topology contains the two components. And what is the relationship between the two between different services? It is quite possible both these services are installed on the same virtual machine. So your virtual machine, it becomes your infrastructure service, and now we have three components. So you can, so the relationship could be that database, which is your source service, is related with is hosted on a destination service called VM. Your web server, which is a source service, is also hosted on the same machine, which is your destination service. So you can define relationship in that way, between different services, who is hosting on what, who is dependent on what, something like that. And what would service orchestration would mean? Service orchestration are all those procedures. Basically, how do you start, stop, suspend, resume, delete, monitor, scale, patch, right? Basically, with any services, you will have to start it, stop it, suspend it, resume it or delete it, and even monitor it, right? Why do you want to monitor? Because you want to measure it, measure the performance, then measure it for billing purpose, because you have to tell the user, right, that you have used so much of my services. Or sometimes there may be, you may want to modify the service. So what could be the example of modifying the service? There could be a patch that needs to be applied to the service. So patches are not only applied to operating system, it can be applied to any piece of software components inside which you're running inside the cloud. And you may have a function where you want to scale it also, right? So your web server is, one web server is not enough to manage the load of the website, so you create a duplicate copy of web servers, and that would mean scaling, right? And whenever the customers are less, you have to scale it back also. So it's scaling up and scaling down. So here you are looking at the service template, which has got node types and relationship types, and so node types basically refers to the components, right? As I told you, there is a web server and there is a database server, so there will be two node types in that case, and both of them will be related over here. So here you see this is the root service, sorry, this is a root node type. So there are, through which two node types are created, and there is a relationship template defined with it. So so example of a node type are web service, middleware, database, VM, or it can also mean a VM. So in case of a VM, then definitely that service will require an artifact to, and what are the artifacts of porting a VM, OVF file and your image file itself. Without that, you cannot go ahead with installing a VM. And what is the example of a relationship type? A relationship type is middleware is hosted on web server, database is hosted on web server, and web server is deployed on VM. All this kind of relationships helps you to know which services are we dependent on, and every service will have its own artifacts, right, and it will have its own orchestration processes. So when we say orchestration process, I said it is to we saw that it is all the operations that need to be supported by the services, and how in what sequence these steps are going to be followed, like which whether you're going to start then stop, or whether you're going to start and then leave it running. What is the different states, how does one move from one state to another state, everything, though the steps, especially when you're installing, you need to know the steps in which everything has to be installed, in case of services, or if you have to scale, you have to know the steps. And how do you express the steps? You express the steps in terms of plans. You need to come up with your own plan, when plan is basically a set of steps that you're going to follow to implement a service. So what does Tosca rely on, to implement any service? How does it, what type of plans it creates? It uses this standard called BPMN or BPEL. So these are the standard it uses internally to implement a service. So these standards are already available, so it is just reusing it. So your orchestration part, as I told you, a service template consists of two things. One is the topology part. The topology part will have the services, which is the node types, and the relationship between the services, which is relationship type. And the second part of your service template is your orchestration, which is the plan to how do you manage it, right, with what type of operations will be there, what set of steps you have to follow, and that plans is implemented using BPEL standard. So if you have to know what BPEL standard is, then you have to study that separately. Now how do we pack a service and port it across? So basically you need to send across all this, so you need to send it in this Tosca format, all the metadata, right? So, and that metadata will be here, in this folder. So you will have 5 or 6 folders, and which everything has to be packed in this file called .csar, which is Cloud Service Archive file. So just like we have .ovf file for OVF, for Tosca we have .csar. Any services that have to be moved around or that have to be dealt with, okay, so there we go. So any services that we deal with in the cloud, it has its own folder structure, and all this is packed in one zip file. You can think of this as a zip file .csar, which contains all these folders, and these folders will contain all the information that we're looking at. So metadata is basically data about data, right? And what are the services, and then we have types, right? Node type, relationship type, what are the node types, and what are the components, service components you're using, and what are the relationships in that. All those will be captured in types folder. What is plan? Plan is basically the set of steps that you're going to follow to implement a service or manage a service. And what is virtual images? Virtual image is nothing but, as I told you, it is an image file. In case if you are installing 3 components, which is your database server, your web server on a virtual machine, so virtual machine becomes your third service component, but you definitely require a image file, right? And that can be passed along inside the virtual image folder. And jars are nothing but, it's like your if you want to run some programs on this, it's like a zip file, right? So your zip file can contain, let's say, Java programs that you need to initialize, then that also can be passed in your jar folder. So in any CSAR file, you will pass on all this information. So based on this information, you will be able to port a service, which means if I have to move any my S3 service, for example, from A to B, then I can do it in this format. But as I told you, if S3 is not supported on the other end, it would be difficult, right? So portability does not mean I can just port it into anything. The services have to be supported. I can maybe port a database, something like Oracle to Oracle, or Oracle to SQL Server. That kind of portability, maybe migration, you can say, is possible. And so when we are sending an Oracle from one side, we can translate it into SQL Server on the other side. That is quite possible. So how can we what is how can we look at what is the perspective we can look, have in terms of all standards? So far, so we have seen already on the left hand side there is a hypervisor, VM, and CIM. That is the, we have already seen that this is implemented by your OVF standards. So, and on the your right hand side, you're seeing CME, CAM, OCC, and file been passed. OVF file has been passed, and platform services also been passed. So so Tosca is basically a portability standard for any types of services. So we are dealing with infrastructure service as well as platform services. So it does not mean that it is only handling infrastructure. If it is infrastructure, then it will pass it on to CIM, and if it is platform, it can pass it on to some program which will create the specific service. That will be proprietary implementation. But at this level, at the Tosca level, everything is generic, and that is how cloud will be managing all the services using Tosca service templates. For any services, there will be a service template which gives you the metadata, and which gives you the actual your raw files that you need to install, something like your SQL scripts and SQL to install a database, or something like your virtual machine images. It can contain all those artifacts, plus it will contain a plan, which is your orchestration of a set of steps that you're going to follow to manage the service, to start, stop, install, whatever. So this as you see, there's all the standards that we have covered so far. On this side, on the right hand side, mostly we are seeing interoperability standard. Means we are trying to interoperate with somebody on the other side. On the other side, it may be implemented in some other kind of implementation, and the interoperability protocol, this standard internally, they realize that this something, we have to port it, and then it will deal with Tosca, and Tosca will internally deal with whatever implementations it has inside its cloud. So if it is, let's say, Zen implementation, then it will deal with Zen implementation. If it is dealing with S3 service, then it will deal with S3 service. So this is the perspective of all standards. So with this, we have covered Tosca. So I hope that was a little easy. Let's look at it. So so when we look at so now the third area is the performance area, right? So when we are dealing with performance, what type of performance we look at? The performance would be your, that if I create a machine, it should be available, it should be, if I want to increase the number of machines, and I should be able to scale it, in case so availability, scalability, these are kind of performance measures, and all these performance are measured in terms of service level agreements. So in the service level agreement, it will be mentioned that I will be, my computer will be on at all times, or maybe 99.9% of the time. This is a kind of contract that we create with the cloud provider, or the cloud provider themselves they tell you that this is a kind of service level agreement that we will agree upon. So how are agreement documents managed? It is, they use WS agreement standard. So this is a SOAP based standards, as we know. in when we studied SOAP, we did come across 74 SOAP standards, right, which starts with WS dash and something something. So in the same way, there is WS agreement and WS agreement negotiation standard that can be used to express the SLA between cloud provider and cloud consumer. So TM Forum is another organization which focuses on SLAs between multi-partners in a multi-cloud system. So if you have two clouds, like your private cloud plus public cloud, or public cloud and public cloud, well, as I told you, I gave you examples of AWS and Azure also can use each other, each other's services. And so what are the standards, and to be, what are the SLAs that it needs to be looked at, and how that standard has to be expressed is TM Forum is an organization that have come up with all these standards. So if you have to study those standards, then you have to go into details over them. So it says the cloud service monitoring standards is less well developed. Means this is a very young standards, and it has not been fully it has not got that much maturity inside the market as yet. That's what it means. So what are the use cases in performance standards? What are the scenarios? Definitely when you're dealing with performance, then we are dealing with whether how well you're monitoring, how you need to monitor everything, right? What is running inside your cloud, everything has to be monitored. If you cannot monitor, you cannot measure, and if you cannot measure, you cannot report. So all these three things are related to each other: monitoring, measuring, and reporting. The other things is I should be able to scale and right size, right? In the sense, I should be able to use as much as I want. If I want 4 machines at that time, I should be able to do it. Can you achieve that kind of performance? Then your cloud resources could mean your network resources, right? How fast it is working, networks. Are you using your AWS backbone network, or are you using an internet network? It all depends on that. So whatever services cloud provides, it will have its own way to monitor, measure, report, scale, and right size it. Then we come with the fourth area of cloud computing standard, which is your accessibility standard. In accessibility standard, so what is accessibility standard? It is for those who are differently abled, right? So the people who cannot are able to see, or able to hear, or are partially blind, there are all types of differently abled people are there, or they are disabled also. So how does what are the standards followed to reach out to these people? If a blind person is reading your website, how will that blind person be able to do it? If blind person wants to do some work on cloud computing, wants to go to the AWS website and start a machine or stop a machine, then how will they do it? So this is where cloud looks at accessibility standards, right? So WCAG is mentioned over here, which is like your web content accessibility guidelines. So this is the first thing that has been there for a long time, and whoever is there this is more like your front end standard, I will say, because it deals with directly with your customers, but it does not mean that website is the only way. You might require screen readers. Sometimes if you look at your Windows system, there is a tool called narrator inside your Windows system. With the narrator tool basically reads out everything is there on the screen. So this is one way of reaching out to the people who are having difficulty maybe reading. So the computer itself will read out to you whatever is there on the screen. And voice commands, that is second way. Then magnifying your website, you should have your magnification of your website enough for people who are having difficult time reading. You cannot just create a website where some set of people cannot read. You have to be inclusive. You have to include all these kind of people ideally. So ideally this kind of standard has to be is preferred. There are around in the whole world 15% people are in this category, who are differently abled or disabled, and these are the standards especially created only for them. So sometimes on a website, let's say you have a button, you click on that button, something happens. Now what does that button do? You might have it in your HTML tag. There are specific tags which you can we can look at. It's called ARIA. Do I have it here? No. So basically when you where is that? Yeah, so essentially if you get deeper into this, you will reach out, how do we implement an HTML file that is accessible, which follows accessibility standards. So you can study about that, and there are different standards over here in accessibility: ISO 9241, 20, ISO 9241, 171, ISO 27451. So what are these standards for? This is just accessibility guidelines for. So whenever accessibility word means for differently abled or disabled people. Okay, remember this. So accessibility guidelines for information communication technology equipment and services. Accessibility guidance on software accessibility, and human factors engineering or software user interface. So this will talk about human system interaction. So here is where probably they are going to talk about if a blind person is accessing your system, how they should interact, what are the standards that you need to follow. So and it will give you some specifications over here. So for example, in US, if you have to enter into any building, you have to have a way for the wheelchair to get in from source destination to to the destination, from the source to the destination. So the wheelchair should be able to move across vertically as well as horizontally. So these are the standards which is followed, which I have seen in US, and it's not followed everywhere all over the world, and but standards are there. It does not mean it is implemented, but standards are. People have given you solutions, people have given you structure. If you follow those set of steps, it only reaches out to the people. So in e-learning education training, this is a very specific standard for how to create e-learning tools, education tools, training tools. This is just, if you're looking at that for people like this, people your people who are unable to manage the system very easily, you can look at this standard 24751 ISO. So ISO is an organization, okay, International Standards Organization. It is a SDO, which is Standards Developing Organization. So right in the beginning I said there are many SDOs, and it is not always that NIST had to create his own standard. NIST is prescribing a set of standards which probably some of the standards it might come out on its own, or it is quite possible it might be already there must be some standard in the market, and that is a good to good to accept, good to use standard. So this area I find because to understand how these people struggle and to come up with a system is not very so easy, and not everybody. This is a very niche area, I feel, and very less people will get into this accessibility standards area. Then we have security standards, right? So let's have a look at that. Okay, the complexity of the cloud computing architecture supporting 3 service types and 4 deployment models and cloud characteristics, specifically multi-tenancy, heighten the need to consider system data and systems protection in the context of logical and physical boundaries and data flow separation. So definitely when we are dealing with cloud, we are dealing with the data. First of all, we are dealing with virtual machine, and we are dealing with physical machine also, and we also dealing with the flow of data, and dealing with the usage of systems, multiple systems, right? It is a multi-tenancy model where everybody is going on the cloud, everybody is creating their own system, and everybody has their own data. So now how does cloud protect everyone from everyone. It is like, you need to create borders, right? And that is what is called logical and physical boundaries. So what would a physical boundary would mean? A physical boundary would mean I have a machine. That machine is totally kept separate outside the network from the other network. That is my way. If I go offline, if I just remove the network cable out of my computer, I am creating a physical boundary. But what is logical boundary? So logical boundary is you know um, is like I have a network of I have a network of A, B, C, and D, and whatever I name them. But I create my another virtual network on the top of it, and I give access to that virtual network towards, I protect that virtual network. It's like your virtual machine, right? So virtual machine is like your logical boundary. Physical machine is like your physical boundary. So if you are protecting a virtual machine, then you are also one virtual machine from the other virtual machine. That is, you're creating a logical boundary. That means two virtual machines running on the same box, they have to be protected from each other. The data from one virtual machine to the another virtual machine on the same physical machine should never interact with each other, right? So that would defeat the purpose of security, and that is not desirable. So logical, when we deal with logical boundaries, it is much better than at the physical boundaries. You should have your one plan how we are going to secure your physical boundaries, like protecting one building from another building, maybe one machine from another machine. You should have a plan, and what data will flow from what data. Between these boundaries also data can flow, right? And what data should be allowed and what data should not be allowed. So your data itself becomes another area of security, right? So who can see that data, who can tamper with the data? So security is at different levels, so, and everything has to be taken care of, but ideally, you should restrict all your users inside your logical boundaries. So I hope you all understand. So logical boundary would mean make sure all your users are inside your virtual machine. To delete a virtual machine and to secure a virtual machine is much easier than to manage a physical machine which has been compromised. If somebody has got access to your physical machine, it also means it has got access to all the virtual machine. So physical boundary is more important than logical boundary, and one way of protecting the physical boundary is by keeping everybody in logical zones. So in a logical area, in your logical network, keep them separate area, so that they cannot reach the physical boundary. So security has got 8 branches, as I told you, right? It has got what is the time? We can continue, I guess. So do you want a break right now? I want to continue. Now we are moving into the security zone a little bit. It's a very small part of the lecture lab, but still. Should we go ahead and take a break? Okay, so we'll meet in a very short time. We'll meet at 4:15, 7 minutes.